That's Schmemann. I had a reading list, it's somewhere around here. This is not on, I forgot to put this on the list. That's from Schmemann's book, For the Life of the World. I've been told I have the gift of bibliography. I have to exercise it carefully. For the Life of the World, Alexander Schmemann. So the world that we live in is both gift and epiphany. Not just raw material. Modern culture and modern economics tends to treat the world just as raw material awaiting some defining act of our wills. By contrast, the biblical picture of our life in the world is characterized by two things. Because creation is a good gift, we are called to stewardship, and because creation is meaningful, that it can tell us something, we're called to attend to it, that we might be wise. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to have to skip a long section on stewardship. Sorry. And I want to get to the wisdom issue in a minute, but I want to continue to talk about this, what kind of world we live in. This question of our proper posture toward creation is a foundational one. How we think about our relationship with creation is the first step in establishing Christian thinking about the shape of our cultural lives, specifically economics, but not just economic life. There's a sense in which all that we call culture is how we order our relationship to creation, including the human presence in creation. And there's also a sense in which economics is fundamentally about how we order our engagement with the stuff of creation, from agriculture on. So how might we think of our posture in creation? Well, I've already suggested we are grateful. We're the recipients of a gift in creation. Colin Gunton has suggested the Christian posture toward creation in this way. We stand neither godlike over the material world, as the rationalism of the Enlightenment has encouraged us to think, nor do we stand at the mercy of something utterly different and incomprehensible, as some forms of existentialist reaction to rationalism may suggest. We can know the world, though not infallibly, nor with an aim at a kind of omniscience. We can know the world because we are both part of it and able to transcend it through our personal powers of perception, imagination, and reason. Note how similar this is to the kinds of things said of the creation of the human world in the open chapters of Genesis, Gunton goes on. Created from the dust in a direct series with the earth and the other animals, man is not God, he is not omnipotent or omniscient, but he is part of that which is created. On the other hand, there is a transcendence of the other creatures, made in the image and likeness of God uniquely to rule the earth, not after the paradigm of modern technocracy, but as a gardener over his garden and always under God. Gunton also wants to stress the Trinitarian nature of creation and our relationship to creation, a world that owes its origin to a God who makes it, with direct reference to one who was to become incarnate. Paul says in Colossians that everything is made by him, through him, and for him. John 1, without him is not anything made that was made. A world that owes its origin to a God who makes it with direct reference to one who was to become incarnate. Part of that world is a world that is a proper place for human beings to use their senses, their minds, and imaginations, and to expect that they will not be wholly deceived in doing so. Creation happens with the incarnation in mind, which elevates creation remarkably. Now, I said the world is a site for stewardship and the source of wisdom. On this second point, what I have in mind here is the way in which Christians before modernity assumed that you could perceive in the order of the cosmos a standard for guiding the order of the soul and the order of society. Colin Gunton once again writes that human life was assumed to be good life when it conformed itself to the way things truly are, when it takes shape in the world as it truly is. In general, it was held in the ancient world that knowledge of the universe contained the key to human society. In this respect, the Old Testament is no different from other contemporary religious writings. One of my favorite passages in the Old Testament that deals with this is the 4th chapter of 1 Kings, where there's a fascinating summary of the wisdom of Solomon. It reads kind of like Solomon's CV or resume. And God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding beyond measure, and breadth of mind like the sand on the seashore, so that Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of all the people of the East and all the wisdom of Egypt. And then we're told that Solomon spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. So I have a list of his publications, as it were. And then we're given a glimpse at the content of Solomon's wisdom, a summary of the sorts of things on which his wise proverbs and songs reflected. And it's not the list that we might expect. If you were asked, what would godly wisdom comment on? This is not the list that you in your Bible study would come up with. Here it is. He spoke of trees, from the cedar that is in Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of the wall. He spoke also of beasts and of birds and of reptiles and of fish. Period. The things he said about these things demonstrated his wisdom. The source of Solomon's wisdom, the mechanism of Solomon's wisdom, wisdom that was applicable in many areas of life, was reflection on the things that God had made. The fear of the Lord is the origin of wisdom, but its trajectory takes wisdom through regions shaped by the givenness of creation. And that chapter ends with a testimony to the universality of Solomon's wisdom, demonstrating that his insights weren't just a kind of parochial part of Israelite culture. People of all nations came to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and from all the kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom. Stuff about trees and hyssop. This is a remarkable testimony of the meaningfulness of creation, something which modernity has tended to deny, as I'll spell out in a few minutes. I've just scratched the surface in offering Christian answers to these first three questions. The fourth, how should we live and work in light of who we are, why we're here, where we are, why we're here, would take us a lifetime to explore. In fact, it seems to me that exploring that question ought to be one of the main tasks of Christian discipleship. But we need to move on and try to describe by contrast the way modern culture answers these three questions. As I've said, the assumptions driving modern culture have also distinctively shaped our economic institutions and practices. Now, not all of these assumptions are false, of course, but the false assumptions have been decisive for defining the trajectory of modernity. There's a wonderful insight, almost a throwaway comment, in C.S. Lewis's The Abolition of Man, which also is not, sadly, on your sheet, in which he observes in every mixed movement, the efficacy comes from the good elements, not from the bad, but the presence of the bad elements is not irrelevant to the direction the efficacy takes. In other words, to the extent that Christian ideas inform the development of the modern West, there have been great advances. But the non-Christian, and in some cases even the anti-Christian falsehoods that commingled with Christian truths have corrupted those advances. A Christian belief in human dignity gave rise to the West's concern for freedom. But the anti-Christian belief of human sovereignty has converted our quest for freedom into a defiant rejection of all authority and boundaries. A Christian belief in the rationality of creation led to the rise of modern science. But an anti-Christian commitment to acquiring unlimited power, which was already condemned in the Tower of Babel story, has made it increasingly difficult to govern scientific research and technological application by any fixed moral standards. In every mixed movement, the efficacy comes from the good elements, not from the bad, but the presence of the bad elements is not irrelevant to the direction the efficacy takes. I'm focusing on the bad elements tonight, but it's largely because of the fact that the origins of these bad aspects of modernity are often ignored.